This conference will now be recorded.
All right, welcome everybody to this third NIBRS workshop. We are so pleased to have this opportunity to provide this information to you, and we are so grateful for Kim Martin from BJS and her colleagues at RTI for providing this information to us. You know, there's so much to learn about working with NIBRS, and the more that we can share the lessons as everyone is struggling with this data, the more we'll be able to make the best use of it and provide that insight for the policymakers that we so desire. So for those of you who do not know her, Kimberly Martin is a statistician at the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and she's with the Law Enforcement Incidents-Based Statistics Program. She is joined today by Chris Townsend at RTI International, and Chris is a senior manager and developer at the Center for Data and Science at RTI. With them is Sean Wire. He won't be presenting, but he will be helping to answer questions, and he's a research criminologist at RTI. So with that, let me make Kim the presenter. Did you want to share your slides first, Kim? Is that right, or is Chris going to present? I know we just.
I'm gonna start. That is not what I wanted to share. Hold on 1 second. My apologies. All of a sudden my window changed, so I am very sorry. There it is. Stop sharing screen. Let me try that again.
Okay.
It's not, I got to make myself the presenter, it looks like. Well, it says I am. I'll figure this out. Here we go.
Kim, if you like, I can share slides from here.
I got it. Okay.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Perfect.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Susan mentioned, my name is Kimberly Martin. I'm a statistician at the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And if you'll bear with me, I'm just trying to move my little GoToMeeting screen so I can see my slides. I'm in the Law Enforcement Incident-Based Statistics Unit. The main focus of our work right now is the NIBRS transition and then modernizing how we work with the NIBRS data, how we disseminate the NIBRS data specifically. And that's really the focus of the talk today, is different ways of working with the data and the necessity that's arisen for us to create a different format for the data. And we refer to these as NIBRS Extracts. Essentially, they are a modified, transformed version of the NIBRS data that you might download, for example, on the CDE. And Chris is going to talk more about what the untransformed data looks like. The NIBRS Extracts are a crucial part of BJS's publication plan for the NIBRS data in terms of promoting the use of the data, the value of it, and especially showcasing for a lot of folks who haven't worked with it, just how much they can use that data to they can leverage NIBRS to answer important questions either in their city, their county, or their state. And these extract files are designed to make that process much more efficient. And also they're designed to allow people to download the NIBRS data in a way that combines all contributors together so that you can benchmark. You can quickly take a file, look at what your particular indicator of choice is, and then quickly compare it to another jurisdiction or another state. That's really the goal here. Before I dive in to the NIBRS extract process and the purpose of them, it won't let me click. There we go. Hey, Susan, it's not letting me advance. There we go. Now it is. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just having some lag issues. So before I dive into the extracts, I want to talk first about a BJS program. Most of you are familiar with it, the SJS program. There's a solicitation that's been released, and one part of that is the core capacity building projects. grants up to $75,000 a year for a 1 year to 3 year project period. And I just want to kind of promote this and encourage people to apply for this opportunity. There is a big push at BJS to focus on enhancing the use and data quality assessments of the NIBRS data. And so that's why it's something that I thought would be a good addition to this today's webinar. The final deliverables for this project have to be submitted to BJS as part of your final performance report and any other associated reports, website enhancements, or evaluations that you do. The solicitation does allow for travel funds for up to 2 people to attend SJS-focused conferences and meetings. So it's 2 people in two SJS-focused events. But you must describe your current NIBRS capabilities, how your project will enhance them, and how those enhancements will be sustained over time and in terms of scalability. So I wanted to give a little bit of a plug there. Let me see if going backwards again. There we go. So continuing on this theme with the core capacity building projects, the goal is that, well, really the central focus, if you want to apply for this, is that you would have to conduct research and analysis of NIBRS compliant incident-based crime data. And it's got to be a project that is geared towards showing the utility of the data and also the strengths and limits of using the data to study certain data elements or crime types in NIBRS. Projects proposed under the solicitation should include an assessment and review of the NIBRS data quality that you propose to use. It does not have to be only data from your state. And the publication quality or the final report would need to be disseminated nationally, and it has to include a thorough discussion of NIBRS data quality, NIBRS challenges, those types of things. So that is really the focus, and that's the priority for this project right now. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, just to give this a shout out for those of you who have not looked at the solicitation yet. There are areas of interest that are mentioned in the solicitation. I encourage everyone to review those. Hopefully that increases your probability of getting one of the awards. But these are just a few of those. You can review these after today's webinar. You can review the solicitation. And if you have any questions about this program after today's talk, I have my contact information at the end of the slides. And I can also give you contact information for Stephanie Burrows at BJS, who helps to run the SJS program. So let's talk about NIBRS and NIBRS Extracts. The purpose of today's webinar, I will admit it's a lot of content. The way that we have decided to approach this is we view today's webinar as really a first step in both explaining the extracts, their value, how they're constructed. Some of it is very technical. So we view this as sort of a first step. Oh, all of a sudden the screen changed. That's interesting. I'm having all kinds of tech issues here. Okay. My screen keeps changing for some reason. I'm sorry, Susan. So I want to talk about what the NIBRS extracts are. What is an extract? Some people would refer to it as a data table, but we call it an extract because it's simply one piece of the overall NIBRS data set. And it's a piece that is geared towards taking the data and efficiently analyzing it in a widely available, typical statistical program like SPSS, R. It's really easy to work with in Tableau. So that's really what the goal is. For those of us who are not data scientists, I do not work in a database environment personally. I work in SPSS, data, those types of programs. So this is, for data users who are analysts, statisticians, and are not experts in coding and syntax necessarily, or business rules about how to join segments. I'm going to talk just briefly about the history of the extracts and why some people may not know what they are. It's because the extract file creation process has now changed. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and where you can find previous extracts. They actually have a very long history. They have been created since 1991. I can't even imagine how small that file must have been back then compared to what it is now in 2020, well, 2022. Our most recent year of data available is 2020. And I want to talk a lot about the value of them so that, we can get the message out there that these are, we want to be transparent and get these data out there for users so they can leverage them for their own purposes. And the reason why we want to give a nice overview of this process is because, states have their own NIBRS data sets. And they can't, if they want to know how to create their own, they need a manual, a how-to guide, guidance on how to do that. They're not going to be able to get this from the FBI. If they want to get extract files that BJS creates, we base those on the federal FBI version of NIBRS. So let's say you're a state, the first one that comes to mind is Georgia, that's where I'm from, where they have a special state standard for collecting information on family violence. You can take these basic business rules and these processes and apply them to your own state's data, even though you've got maybe different data elements that are not in the federal NIBRS data. And so we view this as a nice, value added for the states and for SACs. I'm going to discuss briefly how BJS uses these extracts, and I want to talk about current work and our plans for disseminating these extracts and disseminating publications that walk users through the business rules and the logic of creating these, as well as the software used to create these. So what is a NIBRS extract file? I'm going to try to make this as brief as possible rather than read the slide. We all, a lot of us, if you are familiar with NIBRS, you know that there are multiple segments. For the extract files, we rely on 7 of the 9 segments. What an extract file does is it takes those individual segments and it takes data elements within each of those that can be combined, and it combines them into a single file. And the files can be at various units of analysis. So let's say you want to understand just the arrestee as the unit of analysis, or just the victimization event. It's called a victim segment, but I refer to it as a victimization because we don't know who individual victims are in the data. It takes those and it'll take a victim segment essentially, and it'll append all the things that can be attached to that victim segment, but that are in other segments in NIBRS. So it's very efficient. It creates a flat file, that where you can take a specific victimization and look all the way across a row and get a snapshot of what happened during that victimization, rather than having to go through and combine segments and do that extra work. So as I mentioned, they go from long to wide format, and each extract that we've created for BJS, we did this to create a specific perspective that data users may want to look at. We often get data requests about victimizations, especially for hate crime, firearm violence, and sexual assault. A lot of our data requests are, we want to look at it at the victimization unit of analysis. And we want to know, attached to that victimization, whether or not someone was arrested or whether that incident was cleared. Well, now I don't have to go and pull that from another segment. I've got it attached to my victimization extract file, right? And so then the end result is you can easily import, we create these into, I think we're planning on creating SPSS versions for sure, possibly R versions, which Chris has some examples he'll show. And you can also easily convert these to Excel format as well. So that's what an extract file is in a nutshell. That's the short version. Let me give you a little bit of background on the NIBRS extracts. Many people are unfamiliar with them because they have not been they have not been publicly disseminated since, and it's embarrassing, honestly, since 2016. That is the last year for which these extract files are publicly available. Historically, and I'm going to explain what some of these acronyms are. The NACJD, that is the National Archive of Criminal Justice Data. It is housed at the University of Michigan's Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. It's a mouthful. From here on out, we're going to use the common acronym ICPSR. For many researchers in the audience, you're probably very familiar with this portal. You can simply go in, and I can click right here. For the sake of time, I won't, but you can pull up, well, maybe you can pull up the ICPSR website, and you can see the data files. Sorry, I did not mean to go there. Whoa, go back, go back. I don't know why I'm having so many slide issues. If you hit Control and click on this link, it's going to take you to a page at ICPSR that is devoted just to NIBRS. There's a user guide, there's a code book, and there are various file formats that you can download. And you can download the raw untransformed data, and you can download the extracts. However, there is no manual, no user guide in terms of how these files were created. And so we've taken to sort of, referring to these extracts as the black box. We've got these great data sets that allow us to link multiple segments and to use them at various units of analysis, but there is literally not a single description or example of code at the ICPSR website that explains to users how this was created. And that's something that we are out to change. That's one of our goals. So, as I mentioned, the extract files allow for a more efficient analyses, but they are complex and they require, fairly detailed knowledge of NIBRS to analyze the data properly. Now, we're lucky in that we have the FBI's data documentation, but we have none really on how, that tells you the segments, that tells you how each of the segments are interrelated, which parts of the segments can be connected to others. But we just don't have a process, or I'm sorry, we don't have a publication in place, a guide, where users can take that information from the FBI and say, okay, here's the relational rules I need to actually create these extract files, right? And so that is, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We've had a couple of questions come in. I just wanted to get them out there and on the table. First, from Colleen, is there a difference between extracting flat file versus XML extract? And can you combine the two styles of extract?
That is an excellent question. The sourcing of your data is a key issue that we're going to try to touch on as much as possible today. We do not see that process at our level, but it's something that we want to speak to when we put out our publication on this issue. When we source the data, we're getting it directly from the FBI. So they've already handled on their end the XML format versus a flat file format. So I'm going to let Chris talk about that in just a little bit. The data sourcing issue is an excellent question because a lot of states, they may not be submitting an XML format yet. So we will touch on that in just a few minutes if that's okay.
That's great. And we did have one other. Carlos says that the victim segment doesn't allow you to identify the firearm, or doesn't allow you to identify firearm as the weapon that was used. You have to use the arrestee segment to isolate arrest, included that arrest included a firearm, handgun, rifle. And he's asking, is that correct?
Okay. So the way your timing is impeccable for your question. We're working on a firearms report right now, and we're using the victimization extract to do it. And Chris is going to talk about this too. So we joined firearm information to our victim extracts. Those came from the offense segment. That is a very tricky process because it's technically so the weapons that you see in the offense segment, technically they come from the incident. So they describe weapons in the incident generally, right? And so we can append those to the victims, but it's not always going to be, so you can say that a victim was in an incident where a gun was present and they could have been injured, but you won't know if that victim was actually injured by that gun. There could have been another victim in the incident that has an injury from that gun. That part is hard to delineate in NIBRS because of the structure of the data. Does that make sense? So that's about the offender use of a gun. With an arrestee, one of the data elements you can get is whether or not the arrestee was armed with a weapon. I usually don't append, I mean, I can, we could look at that. That is not something we usually look at when we're doing a victimization study. We typically focus on the presence of weapons during the incident itself. But we do get a lot of data requests just recently about guns in general, especially mass shootings, which is something we're working through right now with the extract files. And so that would be something that I would probably look at the arrestee level for understanding, like, if they're armed. I mean, if they were arrested on site at the incident, that would be valuable. We could try to attach that. But in our experience, we append weapons information, offenders suspected of weapon or force used in the incident, which is in the offense segment. We append that to our victimization extract. And I can actually pull up an example of what that looks like in SPSS. I'll pull that up while Chris is talking, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like. That might be the best way to answer your question, is just to show you. But yes, that is possible. Does that help answer that question? Sorry, that was a mouthful. This is a slide I'm just going to throw up here briefly. There are some key terms and definitions, words used in this process that, quite frankly, I was not familiar with. I'm a statistician and a data analyst and a criminologist. I had never heard the term shell script before Chris and I started working on this, and Sean. I use words like syntax, and I use words like merge instead of join. And so I just wanted everyone to know that this key terms and definitions slide will be at the end of this PowerPoint if you would like it for additional resources. It's just a snapshot of a larger appendix that we're going to have for our extract file publication, where we kind of define all of these. And a big one is the word concatenated that you see under join. That is what I refer to the extracts. I refer to them as concatenated files. It's a very statsy term. So I'm going to try to move away from using that, but I wanted to just highlight that term. So I don't know why there's animation on here. And just in case anyone hasn't had their coffee yet today, I've got really bright colors on here. This is the big picture of what we had to do. When I say that the historical process for creating these extracts was a black box, I really wasn't joking. Chris will talk about this. We essentially had to walk back the process. We started with a product with the last ICPSR extracts that were created, which were in 2016. We had to look at their data. We had to look at the FBI's data on the CDE and literally try to piece together the business rules and processes and codes for how to do this. And along the way, there were some pretty valuable lessons learned. And we're going to talk about that. The fact that now we don't have to use master files, if folks are familiar with that term. And so this is just the big picture of the steps we went through. We had to review the NIBRS standards, memorize the code book, the user guide from, front to back. We had to map out the business rules, what can be joined, how should you join them. So that's really step one. And then we really kind of mapped out here how that pipeline from how the data go from the local level up to the FBI. And this really speaks to the data sourcing issue. So we know that local agencies and states and some federal entities are, they enter their data into a NIBRS compliant RMS, or they integrate those standards into their RMS. And this is still a challenge. There are RMS vendors out there who still don't have some NIBRS data elements. So that is a crucial step. We say in the stats world, garbage in, garbage out when it comes to data. Step 2 is essential. And then officers input that data into the RMS. Agencies will then submit that data to their state UCR programs. And to Colleen's point, that state UCR program will then submit that NIBRS data to the FBI. And they can submit that data in one of two formats, a flat file format or XML. the FBI is making a push. They really want to see most states transition to XML formats at some point. After that, in March, once the FBI receives the data, they will eventually release the NIBRS data on the CDE. That happens in December. So they put out their data tables, crime in the United States, in September. Okay, so it's March, they get the data. September, they put out, you know, the key data tables that they have for crime in the United States. And then in December, that is their typical benchmark. I don't know if that's going to change this year, but that is their typical timeline for when they release that data. And this is where the challenge really, you know, came in for us. We went to the CDE to download the data. And when you download the data, and I have a link right here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to let users, you know, look for themselves. The last step is we have to go and get this data for all these states to create the extracts. And if you click here, this takes you to the FBI CDE, to their download page. And what you see on the NIBRS download page is that you cannot download a single file that contains NIBRS data from all the submitters, from all states that submit data. It is state by state by state. And so the key challenge, and one of the reasons why we decided to embark on the extract file process again, you know, after 2016, was how are we going to benchmark data without merging data from multiple states? It's just too inefficient, right? And this is where I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Chris, who is going to talk about the process for how we created the extracts. Chris, I will hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Kim. So,
oh, should I make you the presenter? So that, hey,
no, I don't have the
sorry?
latest slides, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, what about the slides?
I don't have the latest slide deck, so if you'd keep presenting, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely, just let me know when to click.
Yep, thank you. So, yeah, thank you again. First, we're going to look at the segments used to build the extract files at a high level. Then we'll dive into a couple of segments, for example, to provide a little more detail. And then we'll look at extract files, talk about our tech stack, how we reverse engineered the ICPSR extract files, and then try to answer any questions. But I will say, please feel free to interrupt me with questions if I touch on an area that's of particular interest to you, or if you'd like more clarification on something I've said, because I've been working on this heads down for at least the last 18 months. So I take a lot of what I know for granted. And that's one of the reasons we want to put that on paper and release a document that explains how these things can be joined and how we produce these so that it's not a black box for anybody else. Technically, there are several other segments than what we have listed here, but those other segments make up a tiny percent of the data. Arrestee window and window recovered property come to mind. And like I said, they're really tiny portions of the data. And so from an analytic perspective, they're pretty insignificant. Batch header consists of demographic data about the agency. The documentation on ICPSR website still has a very old 3-file batch header segment definition that doesn't exist anymore. So our documentation we hope to produce will have the most recent file formats and things like that available. The administrative segment consists of data about the incident and associated segments. So you'd see things like the count of offense records, count of property records, et cetera. And that's important because when you look at the extract files, there are places where you may see only 3 offenses from the offense segment, but there may be a count greater than 3. And I'll show an example of that. Those are very tiny occurrences in the data, so that you go, while there may be technically, it's possible to have more than 3 offenses with the incident, the offenses the incidents that have that occurring are very, very small. I think it's like 99% of the data has 3 or less offenses, something like that. So continuing on, the offense segment consists of information about the offenses associated with the incident. Property segment consists of information about the property associated with the incident. And the reason I keep saying that, and if you go back to that first slide that had the link, yeah, there you go. All of the segments may be joined to an ORI and incident, but not all segments may be joined to all other segments in a meaningful way. For example, someone had asserted that one can't join property directly to offenses, and that's true. And I don't imagine an RMS is set up to require officers to associate property to each offense. They're just recording the incident. This is the incident. These are the victims, right? And then, but as far as property is concerned, I can't imagine they're mapping property to a particular offense. They're just saying this is all the property associated with the offense, potentially, unless it's something like that.
Hey, Chris, can I jump in with one comment? Because I thought that was a really interesting question. When this is part of the importance of, you know, the word, us all sort of having a shared standardized language. I sometimes use perceptual shorthand and talk about connecting property to an offense because I'm working on robbery right now, and I can connect, for example, we have a lot of interest at BJS and DOJ in carjacking recently because it's been in the media, national media. I can connect whether or not, you know, a robbery was a carjacking by looking at the proceeds of the robbery. And so I think of that as property. And so it's interesting. There's like multiple ways to talk about this. And I thought that was an important point to make. But what you said is exactly right. But other people might think of property connecting to an offense in a different way, like in a robbery example.
Yeah, and I did think, you know, when that question came up, I did think, you know, there's probably is a way that you could build a bridge to get there, but one would have to classify offenses with specific types of property or something like that and create those categories to create a cross-reference and a bridge to get there. But it's definitely not part of the data. And yeah, it's just not part of the data as is. And we all inherited this file format. So that's just, it's definitely appears to be more incident centric than anything else for sure. So next slide. So this is, and I just want to touch on a couple of examples. This is an example of just part of the batch header segment. You know, the first field, the 01 field, is a segment code, which tells us that the batch header, and this is the raw data as one would load it from the flat file. You know, the 08 field is the state, there's population group. The actual segment file has all sorts of additional demographic data about the agency and the municipality in which that agency operates to provide contextual data. I believe a lot of it's pulled from census, or it would allow you to join census data so you can get even more contextual data. But that's the intent of the batch header.
And one thing I would like to mention, going back to the SJS slides that we talked about earlier, one of the ways that I know I personally and RTI and others, Erica Smith, Alexia Cooper at BJS, one of the ways we've tried to advance using NIBRS data and sort of showcasing what it can do is taking this batch header segment and creating a batch header extract, because we have a crosswalk file also available at ICPSR at University of Michigan, where we connect to each of these ORI codes, the FIPS code for the city, if it's a city, the county, the state, and then that allows us to go over and pull information about the size of the agency, how many officers they have. We then can pull census data that tells us about the context within which law enforcement is operating, context that they can't necessarily control. And so this batch header segment is really crucial, and it's a great way to sort of advance, how you can use the data. And I just wanted to jump in and say, if anyone has any SJS ideas, here's one. that would be a big leap forward. It would be great. We have one project at BJS right now. It's from the state of Wisconsin, where they're doing exactly this, and we funded it for that very reason. Okay, sorry to interrupt. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate those interjections for sure. One thing I want to point out too, if you notice, all of these variable names are just BH and some number. Every segment is like that. And one of the things that BJS did with the extract files is embed the actual descriptions next to the variable name. So I'll show that, and Kim will show that when she shares one of the examples of the extracts. But if you use these, it just becomes really frustrating to remember what each variable is, because it's not a very descriptive name. And then if you can make me the presenter for just a moment, I was going to show that link just real quick, because I will reference it later when we talk about how to join files and everything. Thank you. Okay, so can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So that link in the prior slide links to ICPSR's definition of all of the segments and the variables that are there. So if you're familiar with the data, you likely reference this. I reference this all the time when I'm trying to look at the data. As I said, it is somewhat outdated because these batch headers are no longer 3 files, and I don't know when the cutover was, but all of the data I've looked at from 2015 to date, with the files that we've created, don't use this. It's all concatenated and includes a lot more information actually, but it is still a good reference because all of the other segments are pretty consistent. There's a couple errors in their documentation, but not so many that it isn't useful. So I'd like to make you the presenter again, Kim, so you can share those slides. Okay, I've got a lot of lag on my end too. I'll try to minimize that going forward. Sorry about that. So this is the example. What's that?
Did you want me to go to this slide?
Yep, that's perfect. This is just a quick example of some of the data from the victim segment. Again, it contains victim demographic information, a lot more data that's what's on this example. Victim entry, victim offender relationship, all sorts of additional data. That link I did share has that defined as well, so that you can see all of the columns. And then again, of course, the victim extract file has all of this data along with the embedded descriptions next to the variable names, so that you know exactly what you're looking at, which is super helpful. And then if you go to the offense segment, this again is just a quick example of the offense segment and some information that's available there. And as you can see, kind of what I'm trying to get at is the segments by themselves can be a little difficult to process, because it's hard to know what you're looking at, because there aren't any descriptions embedded in the data, both of the variable names, and then the extract files actually have the lookup values, or the the values defined with an associated description, so it becomes easier to analyze what you're looking at rather than having to just understand what all the raw data means. So next slide.
And if I could jump in, I think that that's really important. I know so many in the audience probably have, in fact, I know I've heard Colleen, they have these variable numbers memorized, right? I mean,
Sure.
because of that, but we've got so many agencies in states that are in the process. I mean, the entire state of California, every state is now certified. I think we still have one holdout. But I mean, they're all of, gosh, New Jersey, I think even Pennsylvania, I can't remember Pennsylvania, but I mean, the largest states in the country, with the exception of Texas, they're just now getting certified. And so this is all new to them. And so this is what the data looks like when you go and you download a raw segment. And I can only imagine feeling a little overwhelmed. And so I'm going to move over to the next slide, which is, oops, accidentally. Chris is going to go over an example of how we did this. And this is with, I am so sorry. My my mouse apparently has a little bit of schizophrenia going on here. So Chris, I'll turn this slide over to you.
Actually, Kim, before we jump to that topic, we did have a question from Ashley. If the victimization extract is long, is it still one victim per row? And I see Sean
Yes.
has answered that in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah,
And that's the joy. That's the joy of it. And then we create, you've got the victim sequence number, and then you can also link them because we keep the incident number that those victims were associated with. So for example, if I wanted to look at, I love picking on Wisconsin because I love Wisconsin. If I wanted to look at crime in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I wanted to know if I would, let's say I've got my victim extract file, and I want to know how many shootings, not shootings, how many violent crimes where a gun was present had more than one victim. In my victimization extract file, I simply aggregate on the incident number, and I can see how many victims there were. But they each get their own individual row. Because certain things in the incident might happen to one victim but not another, and obviously their demographics are different, or could be. So yes, I hope that answers your question. And I can, at the end, I might not do it right now, but at the end, I can show you, if there's time, I will pull up an SPSS file that shows you exactly what that looks like. Any other questions before we move on?
No, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. Take it away,
Great.
Chris.
Okay, thanks. So so the incident extract consists of one incident or per record or per observation, and up to N records from other segments. And again, the reason I say up to N records is because the reason there are 3 in some cases and 10 or in others is because the extract files are designed to give you the vast majority of the data that you could possibly have in that extract, with the few outliers not included. And I would say not included in the sense of not included in a wide format, because there's such a tiny fraction of the data, but it would actually balloon out the extract files to make them large just to have those additional columns. And they're already very large files because they consist of all the states. You know, and my example there that I've written is, you know, up to 3 records from the offense segment are joined in, but there could be greater than 3 offense records for a given incident. And we'll look at that on the next slide. You go back.
To your point of what you just said, Chris, we did an analysis on this using the 2016 extracts, since that was the latest year. Well, we looked at the raw untransformed data and we looked at the extracts. And RTI and BJS did this analysis where we tried to understand how many, how many incidents out there have 10, 20, offenses that happen in them? And what we found was that for every agency that submitted, a full year of data in 2016, and that's this first column you see that says all agencies. We also broke it out, by small and large agencies. But for all agencies, when you see that second row where it says single offense incidents, 88% of 5.2 million incidents in 2016, 88% only had one offense. And then we looked to see how serious that one offense was. And, it's half and half. Half of those single offense incidents were, part one offenses in the old summary world, part one. And about the same amount, 49%, were non-part one offenses. And so then we wanted to look at the multiple offense incidents. And I mean, literally, we had 1%. You'll see the red oval. 1% of 5.2 million incidents involved more than one part one summary crime offense. And so then we looked at ones that had even more than that, and there's just not enough of them. The vast majority, you capture it at 3 offenses. And that what's nice is that doing that work, it really makes the file so much more manageable. It's so much quicker to do the analyses. So to your point, Chris, I just wanted to show them that, we have definitely looked at this. There will be incidents in certain years that we will be made aware of. I'm trying to think of an example of something that's catastrophic where maybe 15 different offenses happened or victimizations, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but when those do happen, we are going to have a protocol in place for how to handle that in our extracts. But for right now, we just don't have that need. We're capturing, almost everything. I mean, like 99 point something percent, just looking at the first 3 offenses in each incident. So
Yeah,
just to
thank
speak
you.
to that issue of the 3 records, yeah.
Yeah, and that might be an opportunity to create another extract that's a supplement that's only incidents that have more than, whatever the target is, whether it's offenses or victims or whatever, so that it's not, so the whole file isn't so large, but you can still look at those if they're of interest, that sort of thing. If you go to the next slide.
Okay.
And this is where we're trying to show visually what we're trying to explain. So that first table is from the administrative segment, and if you see that circled red 8, it's showing that with that incident, there were 8 offense records. And in the second table, that's the actual incident extract, and we're showing that we joined in the first 3 offense codes. So that's just visually showing what we just described and what Kim was explaining. So go ahead and go to the next.
R that we're looking at?
Yep, those are just our data table.
Okay.
If you notice,
Oh.
those had the descriptions I was referring to. So I took both of those. While I said administrative segment, if you notice, they now have the descriptions next to the fields. It's actually the administrative segment portion of the incident extract. So even internal to the extract, you get every segment joined in with relevant information so you could understand. So even for that incident, if you go, oh, okay, I would like to drill in on this a little bit, you could join in or look up that specific record or set of 8 records from the offense segment to figure out what's going on or see if it's of interest to your analysis, something like that. So
Chris, just so I'm clear and the audience is clear, this right here where it says Rex offenses, this is the administrative segment.
So yes,
Which segment
it is the administrative segment. Yes.
And this particular, this row right here represents an agency?
That row represents an incident.
Okay. Within an agency. And so then I'm trying to make it clear, this 8, how can you explain just one more time how this 8 incidents in the administrative segment, what it means for here?
Yeah, what it means for that lower red oval, what we have circled there are the offense segment records that were included in the extract. So only 3 of the 8 were included in the incident extract.
Got it. Okay. Got
But
it.
that's,
So
and that's the case.
this
That
could
is
have
such
been
an
8
anomaly.
columns.
Sorry, go ahead.
It could have been 8 columns across, but we've shortened it. Come on now. But we've created it to where it's 3. And so you're saying this is an outlier where there were 8 offenses, but we're only going to capture the 3.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Got it.
That's exactly right. Because if we had the additional 5 columns, that would make the file so much larger, especially if we did that for everything that gets joined in, and it would make it unnecessarily large for 1% of the data, that sort of thing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And, if people are interested in having extracts where we, go up to, let's say, 10 offenses, that's an easy tweak. I would love that as a survey question maybe for after this, but just understand, this conversation, that it really, there are just so few. It's about 10% have more than one offense, and this is in 2016 out of about 5 million incidents. So only about 10% have more than one offense, and just they're almost all, it was 2 offenses, like 2 or 3. And so, but actually more 2 than 3. 3 was pretty rare. So this logic, that's the justification for this. That's what I'm trying to hit home for the audience. So do you want me to go? I've already covered this. So here's the victim extract example.
Yep, and it's going to be very similar. This is going to be presenting the data from a victim-centric view. So 1 victim observation per record, same thing and same justification for how many records get joined in from other segments. And so again, this provides the opportunity to do your analysis from a victim perspective and explore the data that way. If you go to the next slide.
And while Kim's moving the slide, Chris, there was a question for you from Carlos. The number of cases where RecSofts exceed the 3 UCR offense code options is less than 1%. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question so I can make sure I...
Sure, it's in chat. The number of cases where RecSofts exceed the 3 UCR offense code options is less than 1%. He was checking that
That's
was
right.
what Chris had said.
Yeah.
So that doesn't show up in this table, but I can, because I had to fit this on the slide. What this shows is that of 5.2 million incidents, 11% had more than one offense. So let's look at what those looked like. Only 1% of those multiple offense incidents consisted of multiple Part 1, the traditional serious Part 1 offenses. So that's where that 1% is coming from. And then I've broken it down by, like, if it's a Part 1 with a non-Part 1. But I've got a specific table that actually breaks down the percent that's over 3 offenses per incident. So if someone could provide contact information in the chat, I would love to send you that table. It will answer the question you just posed. I just didn't include it here, sorry.
Yeah, and I believe it is less than 1%.
It's tiny.
Right. Yeah, it's very tiny.
It falls off. It's like a cliff. So here's an incident, and here's one offense, and then 2 offenses, and then it just plummets once you get over 2. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so few that even have 3. Now, this is 2016 data. I could look at this again with the 2020 data. I just can't do it right away. But if that is something that users would like to see, please let me know in the chat or afterwards, after the webinar, and I'm happy to do that. This is an analysis we need to update every couple of years anyway. So, okay, I will go
Yeah,
back.
and I'm gonna just look at my R Studio real quick because I have 2017 data, and I have that scenario where I loaded it up just to check, and it was 8,042 observations out of 5.3 million, something like that. So that's why I feel comfortable saying it's less than 1%. It's a lot less than 1%.
It's 0.2%. I've been trying to keep it updated.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sean, for the win. Is it really 0.2%?
In 2019, yes.
So 0.2%, I'm trying to remember how many millions of incidents there were in 2019. I used to have this memorized. So 0.2% had more than 3 offenses.
That is out of 6.6 million.
I think we're okay with 3. Capping it at 3 offenses.
Yeah.
But we can always, like, we can always put out additional extracts for folks who, let's say you're a state that experienced, let's say you hosted the Olympics or the Super Bowl, and there was an incident where there was, 20 victims and 90 separate offenses. We would, if you would like an extract of that where, you expand it out, we're happy to provide. We're going to be providing code on how to do this, but we could also create a file like that or provide the code that would show, provide guidance on how to expand the number of offenses you can include for just, for specific areas. It's not something I would do for the whole nation. It would be a massive file, but so going back to this slide, the victim extract, I mean, the objective here, and this is why I said, I was going to mention how BJS uses these. This is the #1 extract we use. I use the batch header, incident, and victim extract almost every single day. Our last report we put out online, it's an interactive report on sexual assault. It used the victim extract, and we connected information about known offenders, weapons, whether it was cleared, and if the clearance resulted in an arrest clearance. We included information on location and the timing. All of that was appended to each individual victim of sexual assault. So back to Ashley's point, her question. And so that's really the objective of these, is to be able to do that efficiently. You've got everything attached to that victimization you need to get a snapshot of it on a single row in SPSS. And so, one of the examples I was going to mention that, and how we're using it now is we've got a robbery report. It's going to be an online interactive robbery report that's under review at the BJS front office. And it's a victimization extract that we started with, but we also pivot to incident extracts when we look at firearm victimizations where there were 4 or more victims. It's sort of the standard definition of a mass incident. But it was a robbery victimization extract file where we attached weapons, offender weapon use, whether there's a linkage between the type of weapon present and any injury the victim may have experienced, and whether the robbery offender was arrested. I guess I can give you guys the spoiler alert. There's so much missing offender information in robbery, it's pretty difficult. But we could do this quickly because of the extracts. All that information is appended to that individual victimization record. And so in SPSS, it's 1 row containing everything associated with that victim. And that's the beauty of it.
I'm going to jump in with another question that Christopher Henning had. He's asking, did I understand this correctly? The reason to use the extract files instead of directly connecting to the CAE, the API, is because because the CDE API only allows you to query data about one state at a time. So really, it's only important if you need data from multiple states without needing to join or post CDE API extraction.
That's a great question.
Oh,
No, they also do not create extracts. Like it's not, they're not combining segments.
correct.
That's why
Yeah, so if you
BJS
want
pays
to
for these to be created.
mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
sure.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just concurring with you. If you wanted to download the segment in raw file format and concatenate them all yourself, then certainly you can do that. But they don't make, just what Kim said, they don't make the extracts available on a state by
There's
state
nothing
basis.
relational. It's not relational at all. And so it just takes too long, right? So if I've got, so let's say I've got a data request, let's say I work for the state of Georgia and I don't know, the crime council or the governor's office has, or the mayor's office has, you know, questions they need within 2 hours, answers to about number of firearm victimizations. I don't have to go mess with the offense segment. I pull up my victimization extract. I pull out any violent crime for which a weapon, you know, a gun could be present, because there's only certain ones. Can't have a gun, you're not supposed to have a gun present for like a simple assault. I could just go in there, pull those victimizations out. It's already connected, and I can also have other cities in Georgia, their data in there, and quickly create a chart like that comparing what it looks like for Atlanta versus other similar cities. You cannot get that from the data download page on the CDE.
Yeah.
And so that's why
Or you
BJS
could
has
just
been
filter it
paying
directly.
for these. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, sorry, Kim. I was going to say, and alternatively, you could just filter directly to your state or your or ORI or whatever you wanted for your level of analysis. For sure.
Yeah. Would it be helpful if we showed what you get when you go to the FBI's download page? If users want to see that, put it in the chat and we can do it at the very end, so that you can see the value added. I thought I had a screenshot somewhere. I do. I can show you. I don't have it in here, but I am going to click on a link right here. See where it says NIBRS Extracts source from CDE? I'm going to click there. Actually, I'm going to minimize this. Sorry, folks. This is what you get. And it just doesn't really help. It's just not efficient.
I think, Kim, you may have to stop sharing and then reshare in order to change programs. Because
Yeah, I'm going to.
Slides, not the website you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the website, then I'm going to stop share and then show it.
Okay.
What do you see now, Susan?
We're still seeing your slides.
Oh boy. Stop sharing. There we go. Now I'm going to reshare.
That should
So
work.
this is what you get. This is what you get. All right. So here, and I want to give a shout out to the FBI. They have improved the CDE in terms of resources. So here's what you can get. They now have a state program, so I don't know why that says that. But pretty much everyone is, so there's two ways you can do this. You can go to Documents and Downloads, or you can go to the Crime Data Explorer. And I'm going to click here. Documents and downloads. That's a great question, whoever posed that. And what you'll see right here, can everyone see this blue header?
Yes.
It says National Incident-Based Reporting System. So they've
Yes.
got 2020 up, and it says tables. Chris, I know you appreciate that. Instead of data files. And the segments are not combined. You just have to kind of pull them yourself. So here's victims, and then you've got to go state by state. And if I need information fast for the nation, or if I'm in a state where I've got to compare a lot of my local, like a lot of the local law enforcement leadership that I work with, they need data quickly where they can benchmark themselves to other cities. And that's because they have to be accountable to, you know, whoever they speak to, whether it be a mayor or, you know, some sort of state office. But it's just the segments. Nothing is there's no relational connection between any of these. You can get steak, but you know, do you see what I'm saying? It's just not very user friendly. But it is very clear. I mean, it's nice. There's here's NIBRS data for Arizona, and you can pull everything, I think, for them, maybe. And you can click download. I do not believe it is relational. In fact, the FBI, they use our extracts sometimes. They've asked us for them. So that's what you get when you go there. And because the data are structured this way, that is why BJS has hired traditionally the National Archive of Criminal Justice Data at University of Michigan to create these extracts. The next step, and I'll talk about this later, is to create an extract file that's longitudinal. If you wanted to do trends in all of this stuff across places and time. So I'm going to hit stop sharing again. To download it, it wanted me to open up a zip file, and I just didn't want to do that. That would have taken a while. So, oops, didn't mean to do that.
And
So
at this
Chris,
point, if you could share an example victim extract file, Kim, I don't know if you have one ready to share, that would be helpful.
Yeah, let me do that. I'm going to stop sharing again. Oh, I almost hit leave meeting. That would have been embarrassing. My apologies. Our network SPSS has been a little hinky, so everyone bear with me. So at BJS, we have we've recreated, since 2016 is the last year that existed on ICPSR. I'm pulling it up right now. Folks will just bear with me. In fact, I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen right here. So where we keep our NIBRS extracts. And I'll just look at 2019. We want victim. And Ashley, I hope this helps. How do you want to open this file? Are you kidding me? One second, guys. It's going to make me open up SPSS first. I apologize.
Maybe while you're loading that, are there any Are there any questions anybody has so far, or any areas you want us to go next? I think we only have like 20 minutes left.
Yeah, Chris, while I'm pulling this up, do you want to go through your diagrams? The next slides, I would have to pull the slides back up. Hold on one second. It's going very slow. It's almost open. Let's see here. Oh, a lot of people must be using SPSS today. It's going pretty slow. Sorry, I didn't have this pulled up. Slowest.
So Chris, you have a question in chat while we're waiting.
Okay. Let me see.
Can you see, or would you like me to read it out
About
loud?
connecting to the API? What about connecting to the API, api.usa.gov FPI, to get at the data as an alternative to the two options you just showed? I found prepared files that you can download a limitation to, but if you code to connect directly to the CDE, like Tableau to CDE via the API, you won't need to wait for the extracts to be updated. Sorry.
The extracts are created well in advance of essentially, so BJS gets access to the FBI data before it's made public in December of each year. Theoretically, we can release our extracts the day that the NIBRS data go public. Is that part of the question?
No, I think it's like more like, why wouldn't you just use this API? And I mean, the reality is, if your analysis is such that you just need a segment or two, and you're an expert at joining those segments and processing the data, then it's not that, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. You know, particularly if it's on a single state, or, you know, comparing just a couple different ORIs or something like that. If you don't know how to join the data, that's where the extract files become extremely helpful. I don't know, does that answer your question, Mr. Henning?
And Chris, you're
And I
welcome
think it's also
to unmute your mic and speak if that's easier than typing into chat.
I think part of the issue
Yeah.
too is
And then
governance.
about the update frequency. So they do update their CDE data that is the database files. They do update that regularly. What they don't update are the master files or the flat files that had originally been being used to create the extracts. One thing we haven't touched on yet is that we are pivoting to a new process that uses the database files to create the extracts, because those are updated and released more frequently than the hierarchical flat file.
And that's a big advancement. I mean, for years and years, when, you know, ICPSR did these files at Michigan, they relied on the master files. So we would have to wait for those to be released, and then it would take months and months and months. Now we can just pull the data, you know, it doesn't have to be a master file. Chris and his team have figured out a way to use something more akin to what the states work with, you know, untransformed data, no master files, to create these. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I mean, correct me if I mischaracterized that, Chris. But
No, you didn't. And I will say, if you're savvy enough to be calling an API to get your data and doing all that, you are ahead of the game of a lot of people doing analysis, because that, I'm a software developer and I know how to do that, but a lot of people are not going to know how to call an API to load their data that way. That is sophisticated. I will, before you say, I will make one plug. If there's anybody that has so many of these variables memorized from all of these segments. Please, and you're interested in doing this kind of analysis, please contact me. I would love to talk to you about a great employment opportunity for you.
Up on the screen, it's funny. The one thing I do love about keeping the original variable names right here, can folks see SPSS?
Yes.
All right, so this is a victim extract file that we created for the 2019 NIBRS data, and you'll see the first few variables, these are batch header variables attached to each victim. And then you're gonna get down to here, report date, exceptional clearance, and then you're gonna see your 4000s. All of this is attached to each individual victimization. So all your victim demos, injury, and we go up to 5 injuries. And then these are the linkages for offender 1 and how we connect them. So offender number 1, relationship of victim to offender number 1. Offender 2, relationship. All of that is in here. And then you'll see it change from 4,000 variables to the 2,000s, or I guess 20,000s. And that's where you've got location type. And we do 3 in our extracts. We cap it. I get asked this a lot, you can have multiple locations in a single incident. We've got offender suspected of using drugs, alcohol here, whether or not it was attempted or completed, weapons and force, which comes from the offense segment, bias motivation, type of property loss. So someone had asked about property. Property description, value, date recovered, stolen vehicles. I mean, that's on here. And then we've got offender variables, arrestee segments. All of this is attached to an individual victimization. And then we've got the all offenses right here at the bottom, which I think the FBI, Chris, does the FBI create that? I think they do.
We calculate that. At least we're calculating that for extracts.
Okay. Yep. And so that's the variable view. Here's your data view. And so you're going to see all the segments that we attached right here. You're going to have your state, your ORI, your incident number, everything. So I hope that helps kind of demonstrate to folks. I mean, this is so easy to open up and analyze. And obviously you're going to see a lot of empty cells, right? I mean, there's just not a lot of incidents where there's, 5 injuries, right? So that is a snapshot of what it looks like. If that helps, oh, I almost hit leave meeting again. If that helps answer, I know Ashley had a question about, the structure and what it looks like. And I've got examples of arrestee extracts too, and the incident extract. And these are all going to be disseminated very soon. Let me go back to and I know we're running out of time here. But that, and so for the sake of time, I won't go over what some of the other ones look like. But we did do an arrestee one. And so, Chris, I'm going to turn this part over to you. We can briefly go over this. Let's highlight the most crucial pieces because we're going to make this available for the audience after the talk, and we're happy to have a part 2 webinar if people need more guidance. I would really appreciate feedback on the types of information that SACs and data users and researchers would like to see in a manual that lays this out. For some users, it's about the technical pieces that, I have to rely on Chris for, quite frankly, and Sean. Sean does a lot of our validation and comparing our extract files and checking the quality of them. So I would love to hear suggestions after this webinar on critical pieces you might want to see in a publication that we put out about this. Okay, I'll stop talking. You go, Chris. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll try to make this real quick. You know, part of this, in discovering this, there was not a lot of documentation. The ICPSR extract creation process was a black box to us. And so when we first looked at this, we probably ran into the same issue that many states have, which is, okay, I understand the NIBRS spec data. How is that converted to all of this numeric format data where the values are no longer the raw data values, they're mapped to integer values and things of that nature, and with a mostly relevant description. So we first thought, okay, is the FBI giving ICPSR a different data set that we don't know about? And eventually we did reverse engineer that and figured out, oh, they're just changing the raw codes, the population of available raw code values to a numeric sequence with a somewhat related description. And so we just created cross-reference tables to be able to do that same type of mapping so that we could reproduce them exactly. One of the wonderful things that as this becomes open source, let's say you wanted to create an extract file but didn't want to do the mappings to those numeric values, you could stop at the raw data values so that you could start exploring, okay, well, I know we submitted this to either our state level or the FBI. Now, since it's not converted to this numeric value, we could start to investigate what got missing, if any, and why, those sorts of things, which couldn't have been done before, or do your analysis using the raw values if those are more meaningful to you and your analysis. So that's really the quick trying to get to the summary of the next several slides. But I do want to leave, at least a few minutes for questions and feedback so that we know what would be helpful to include in our documentation for sure. So that's like a quick summary of all the following slides, because there's unfortunately still a lot left.
I'm muted. Chris, let me know where, if you'd like me to advance more quickly since we're running out of time. We made this a black box on purpose. One thing I want to mention here is where you source your data is really essential. We get our data, we source our data from the FBI, and one thing that I think really would be valuable is to work with SACs or state programs to see, and actually this was Chris's idea. Chris, you had mentioned it would be really valuable if two states, one or two, could go through the extract file process and see if they come up almost like a data validation. If they come up with either what we come up with or the FBI. I've got a couple of states that have told me that what their data shows, their NIBRS data shows, isn't what they see on the FBI's website. And if that's ever the case,
if they would be willing to share what they submit to the FBI, because then we could create an extract file from what they share with us, what gets submitted, and that would help do validation in a huge way. But it also allows us to create the artifact that if a state wanted code to make their own analytic file for their own state prior to even submitting it, they could use that to compare to the FBI and show the FBI what's missing, and we'd be glad to share that too, for sure. So I just summarized it real quick. You could jump to the last slide and we can talk about roadmap going forward or answer questions, but I definitely wanted at least a few minutes for people to share, to ask questions and share ideas.
The only thing No, I agree. The only thing I want to highlight on this slide right here is this one that says no hierarchy. Can you talk about that briefly, Chris, and how that's central to putting together these extracts?
Sure. Yeah. When we first got started, we have been told that these were sorted by most serious offense to least serious, and that just ended up not being the case. They aren't hierarchical in that sense at all. So that was
And weapons aren't either.
Mm-hmm.
I had to, I learned the hard way that I've got to loop through every weapon code. A gun may appear in the third weapon data element, but nothing in, the second one, or, there is no hierarchy. And so that the business rules are really, really critical. I will go ahead. This is the tech stack you use to create them. This is the logic diagram. We can talk more about this, I guess, in our publication, or if anyone has questions. Chris, you want me to keep going forward?
Yeah, I think because we have like 3 minutes, right?
Yeah. Moving forward. Did you want to say anything about the first bullet?
Sorry, you were breaking up there, but we did touch on this. We are going to have that relational database driven extract. That means we're going to use the more frequently updated CDE data as opposed to the master files. The intent would be to open source the code associated with this project so anybody could utilize it or provide feedback on how we're doing joins and things of that nature. So that's really it. And that way it's no longer a black box for everybody.
Yeah, it's from 1991 to 2016. If you guys go to ICPSR, they have a link next to every extract file that shows you how often it's been downloaded, used, and any published works used with it. They are used all over the research community. And so I think it's crucial for SACs and state programs to know about these files because researchers are using that. And they may use it to describe your data. They may use it, become familiar with it. But it's for years over 20 years was a black box. And so our goal here is to make this transparent, to make it valuable for the SACs and for the state programs and for anyone, other stakeholders, obviously, especially local government, law enforcement. And I wanted to talk a little bit about our goals, okay, the concluding remarks. Besides transparency, I want to talk about how we're going to disseminate these. We've now created new extracts, arrestee, incident, batch header, admin, victim, from 2017 to 2020. We're about to start on 2021, that data. We will be disseminating it in 2 ways, and I've got to first, the decision of when they're disseminated is above my pay grade, but they will be disseminated 2 ways. They will be disseminated in the same place where we showed you the National Archive of Criminal Justice Data at ICPSR, because so many researchers go there to access the data. We will be posting it there this year, hopefully before summer. And we will also have a new portal at BJS, OJP, and generally a new content management system for data. And there's been talks about APIs, and I don't know all the technical speak, but we also have, thanks to Chris, we also have a NIBRS data dashboard that is currently under review. And version 2 of that, it could be version 1, you will be able to pull these extracts directly from them and cut them any way you like. You can remove variables, you can select which agencies and states you want. And so those are our plans for dissemination in terms of the data files themselves. Writing the report, the how-to guide, we are desperate for feedback. We can make this kind of, like stereo instructions, but I really want to know about people's interest in understanding the business rules, ways they might use the data, and any questions they have or wanted addressed that were not addressed today. And so I would really appreciate feedback. And if there are any, any takers to send us their NIBRS data, and of course I'm going to pick on Wisconsin for theirs, but if anyone would send it, I would love to do this data validation, data quality check that Chris mentioned, where we could create one for the state. We can give that code back to you, and hopefully be of use to our stakeholders. And that's it. Are there any questions? I know we're probably at time. I knew it would be tough to cover all this.
There is a lot to cover. We did have a question or a comment from Tom Scott saying, Chris, I get asked a lot about the best method of analyzing the 2017 to 2020 data since extracts don't exist yet. Is what you're using to create the extracts sooner than the master files produced available to the public, or is the only option for them the master files until the extracts are out?
Oh yeah, that is a good question. Right now, the only option would be master files, but we hope to have that new option that can create the extracts from the CDE data soon, like hopefully within a few weeks, and then hopefully that can be made open source shortly after that. So it would still be, even if it's any time before December, it'll be before the master files are released.
Great. Well, I
And
really
part of that conversation is it is a governance issue that BJS and FBI are working out too. So
Yeah.
more to come on that.
All right. I want to thank you all for presenting, Chris and Kim. And there's just so much here. You're absolutely right. We may need another session to dig into this further. In the follow-up, where we send out the slides and the recording link, we'll include a few of the questions that you had at the very end, so that we can maybe we can find a volunteer out there. So thanks again for giving us your time and all this great information. And folks who joined, thank you so much for staying with us.
Yep,
Oh,
thank you, everybody.
I have contact information right here. Susan will be posting these slides. Please feel free to email me, call me. I'm happy to talk about this.
Great.
So thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.